The Fearless Curious Soul. Goldilocks Productions presents The Deep Reading. Connecting you to your soul show.
Hello, this is Suzanne Wyman, the Deep Psychic. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. Please think about the commentary that you can relate to it and see if it is an answer to a question you have about prayers or how the universe supports you. I want you to feel included. If you feel as if the conversation speaks to you, it speaks to you. And I also want you to know that you are part of something greater than yourself. The universe supports you. The universe has your back. And the universe is interested in answering the questions that you have today. So today's show is a little bit different because I'm going to be talking about the journey, the process that people go through in order to reach an objective, a dream, a goal in their life. So I personally have found that your own advice, your own support, and your own understanding of what is best for you is often the very best advice that you're going to get. So I tell people this is your life. You're the person who knows how to advise yourself best, and I really do believe in that. In fact, I can think of several times in my life when I knew my own advice was better, but I followed somebody else's advice because they insisted that they were more knowledgeable. So your own personal advice for you is best. So there are some exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, that's how I view it. A journey, an actual physical journey of actually going to a destination, I've seen that completely change people's worldview, change their ideas about what's relevant, what's important, and what has meaning for them. I've also seen people that got themselves involved in a journey in order to obtain their life's dreams, and that has been just as important as taking a physical journey. So I'm ready to take a caller, and let's do the conversation of my first caller. And, okay. So it is about your life's work that we're going to be talking about today. And,
hello?
John, how
hello?
are you? Can you hear me?
Good. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you speak up just a smidge? Just a little bit louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you better now. Very good.
Okay, good. Yeah, hi.
Yeah, John, how long have you and I known each other?
Oh, my goodness. 40 years?
I know. It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it?
It's time.
Yeah.
Well, I've been married 39 years to Stephanie, so we knew each other before that, I think.
First time I met Stephanie, Matthew was 4 months old.
Oh, okay. So he's 38 now, so yeah.
38 years, okay. I know. I've seen you through differences in your life. Share with the audience what it is, because you're extremely talented. You've had some extraordinary successes. You've done some extremely unique things with your life, along with getting married, raising a family, and all of those conventional things. But you've done some things that are extremely interesting, and so just do that for us. Explain that to us, that journey.
Well, I had a career in broadcast television and television production for 30 years, and the high points of that were, being a cameraman for Johnny Cash show in Nashville, and then I produced 4 Olympics. I was on the organizing committee in L.A., which was exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a lot of important work, I thought, child abuse, child sexual abuse, all kinds of medical education programming as a documentary maker, as a documentary filmmaker.
Okay.
And then then I decided to go into teaching, and I moved to Orange County, out of L.A., which is a big move. But I found a high school that wanted to hire me, and I was a teacher in video production for 25 years. So
wow,
that was kind of a 55-year journey.
So you still, John, you still got a lot of knowledge to share. You've got a lot of great talent. You've got good energy. Definitely at this point in time in your life, you have a piece of freedom that I don't think you've ever really had before. So, because you are the, you do the documentaries, but you also have a visual quality that you really can't put into words, that you can't explain. So recently you did a film of my husband painting the NAMM's opening conference of the drum circle, and when I looked at it, I thought, how can I explain to somebody that John knew he had to take and leave that area, go up the stairs and find a totally different perspective in order to take and really bring that into a place of feeling? Because when I look at that, I don't feel like I'm looking at a film. I feel like I've actually come into the scene and I'm actually there. And that's that's the difference between videographers or you, who is basically a person who's keeping documents, is doing a type of journalism and is creating a dynamic experience, and the person who is uneducated doesn't know what it is, but they feel different after they observe your work. And that's profound.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
No. Thank you, John. But you can now, for the very first time in your life, there's no concerns about anything. It's just you and your dream. Right. And if you could do anything in your dream, not thinking about all of the obligations that you fulfilled for your family or any of those other obligations that you've done for a lifetime, what would you choose to do? What would make you feel really excited and connected?
Well, that's the $24,000 question. I mean, after, not having to work any longer or, quote, retired, now I can, I don't know if I want to, continue the video work. I like doing the drum circle. I got to tell you, there was a kind of freedom about it. Because I wasn't getting paid, because the client had no expectations. It just, there we were doing it. So that's, in a way, Rich has that. I mean, when he goes out and just paints, or when you just give a reading, there's that freedom. And I kind of like that, without the monetary, the client pressure. And you have the deadlines, and you have to. There's a whole difference when Rich paints a wedding and he has to turn it around and has to be done, and are they going to like it and all that, as opposed to just going out and painting something that he sees and he likes. So there's that. I was asked to do my church lesson, my sermon, record the lessons for our church, and that's only 15 minutes a week. And that's fun because I publish on YouTube, which is new to me. And so, I think, it's interesting. My own, first I volunteer at a cat shelter and take care of my cats twice a week for an hour, and I play with them, and I call it a socializer, which is fun. I'm a volunteer. But then I found I like putting puzzles together. So it's a very kind of metaphysical process where I'm putting each piece together, and I don't know where it fits and how it's going to go, but either I can choose not to do it, to give up and be frustrated, or I can push through and, commit to completing the puzzle. which is what I want to do with my life. I want to commit to something, but I don't want to rush into it. And so we'll see how it plays. And I'm experimenting with different kind of sports and go kayaking and but you can't do golfing every, day for 8 hours a day. Work is a big deal in people's lives, Work consumes me for like 8 to 10 hours a day.
Let's talk about that, because I think that you, I've known you for a long time, and I think you function at a higher level, a higher vibration, if you actually have a piece of work that you're working on, and it doesn't have to be 8 hours a day, and it doesn't have to be every day, but you working on something gives you a deeper sense of purpose. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, but the interesting thing here, John, is that you actually have total freedom for the very, very first time. There is no financial obligation, and there is no obligation to meeting a standard. Your standards of excellence are really, really high, and you really are somebody who has more knowledge, is more technically advanced than most people would really encounter. So let me take you through a few ideas. The first thing is that I think that you have interesting ability to work with people that are artists. That seems to be more fulfilling, whether they're wordsmiths or they are visual artists or they are, physical artists. It does not matter. Artistry seems to really pull you in.
That's true.
I understand that because you have to, in order to represent something accurately, you have to have the visual skills. And so you have visual skills and talents and movements to create the visual representation on film, so to speak, to just cut to that word, that you don't think about. So there's sort of like, and I don't mean this in a negative way, there's sort of like a disconnect between your gift being your ability to capture visual movement in a way that is truly an accurate representation, and you have lost that feeling that happens when you actually lose yourself behind the camera and just totally become involved. You've taken that part of yourself for granted for such a prolonged period of time that you have forgotten how gifted that piece of you is. The grind, the deadlines, the teaching, all those things have sort of worn away at that. So the only way I see for you to come back into the process, because it is a learning curve, is one, make an agreement with yourself that you don't actually have to meet anybody's standard about money. And that is a huge relief. Okay? And then the second piece is to find incredibly worthy artists who really need their story. So it's documentary work, which is your area of expertise, because you have a great gift for being truly able to detach and just visually capture the most realistic, authentic part of the process, and then also to take and be involved in the arts. Because whenever you're involved with the arts, your chakras get charged, your prayers get met, your synchronicity falls into place. Your energy feels passionate, intense, alive, and it keeps you out of a stagnant pool of obsession and perfection. So, it's an interesting crossroad experience, because I think this chapter in your life, I personally, as a psychic talking to you, John, think that this is your greatest chapter in your life, where we see the most amazing aspect of your true artistry, where we come to understand you as a person who is able to take and put that camera right in front of your heart and go out there and just rip and tear until I feel like I'm not watching, but I'm actually there. And that's my dream. That's my dream for you. That's my wish for you. That's my hope for you.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, And I just think I should not say think, but I just feel what happened was the grind of the work wore away at the beautiful naivety and passion of immersing yourself. Artists, whether it's a visual artist or a gymnastic artist or it is a musical artist, they need somebody to document them. They honestly and truly need that process. And what you get out of the process is that your artistry is seen, not because somebody has said they want it, but because you have the freedom to pick and choose, and you're not obligated to anyone for anything at any time.
That's exciting, yeah. I think you hit the word crossroads. That's what it feels like, because, I was prepared for a career for all these years, and I did it, and pretty specialized. I mean, it was always video production, film production, and pretty much nonfiction. Not film. So now I'm kind of branching, out and seeing what's out there. So that's exciting.
Oh, good. Really, really good. So, in this conversation, I think the key process for me in observing you is that you are a visionary. Your process is completely visual, and that it doesn't really translate to words. And you figured out a way to translate the mechanics of the process to your students, and you're an exceptional teacher for decades. What a difference you made. And talk about some of the people that you worked with as students and where they went and who they are today, because that's a very interesting success.
Yeah, there are a number of students. Probably Brianna Keeler at CNN is the biggest name that most people know, because she's the Washington reporter. She's the new Wolf Blitzer, if you will, for CNN. So Brianna Keeler was one of my students many years ago. But then I had Sabrina Scherf, who's in Hamilton now on Broadway. So I worked with her, and there was another, student who, there are a number of actors that I worked with who, were coming up, and they were in drama, and we worked together on a show that I produced called Diablo Heat. And they loved to do that, and we had comedy, and we had, news segments, and it was just a perfect fit for high school. And then my son Matthew he's a filmmaker, and he's with Facebook. He was with Facebook, and now he's with another company that does these kiosks all over the world for marketing and advertising. So he helps produce the videos for those. And I don't know. I don't know where all my students ended up. They're certainly editors in Hollywood, and we work at Disneyland. One's a food manager at Disneyland, and you never know, So that was a reward in itself that I never, kind of like an adventure, that was my second career. So now maybe it's my third career without, like you said, the restraints of money and, demands and all that. I can explore something else if I want to. I don't want to go out and make more videos, that's for sure. But something I'm really interested in would like the drumline thing was interesting. So we'll see. It's exciting. Yeah. You never quite know, because, I never thought of myself as a teacher. But then when it started, I thought, wow, this is a pretty nice fit. So you have a great love of animals, and you have you have three really exceptional, beautiful kittens in your house, in your home, in your family. And thanks to you, though, you helped them. You whatever you did, you fed them, milked them, nursed them, I guess.
Yeah,
yeah.
We found you were ready for a new kitten family, and
oh my gosh, they're so healthy.
Yeah, all clean and perfect and beautiful.
I know, they're
home.
very well bottle fed. They were so, and we feed them good food, so that's good. But yeah, they're exceptional cats. I love them.
So just in a conversation here, like you said, your process of documenting the things that are going on, you do have a great love of your animals. So
yeah,
I'm thinking they might be one of your just for fun videos, because there is no cat faster than Jet, and even when he was just a couple of weeks old, he was the fastest one, and then he's grown up and he still remains the fastest one. So
right. That's his name, Jet. The fastest one.
He jets. He definitely jets. So, and it really was a courageous decision to take the kittens in. They were 3 of them, and they were born in the wilderness. They were feral.
I know. Wow.
So, and they are interesting cats. They have free range in your house, and it is interesting to see the full personality emerge when the human restraints have been lifted.
Yeah.
So
we have they're a lot of fun, and I enjoy taking care of them and the other cats too. So yeah, who knows where I could take some. The internet's filled with these little cat videos that people put on. They love. People seem to love those animal films. So
yeah.
That's something to explore. You're right.
Yeah. So this is how I see your story. As your friend, John, this is how I see it. I see it as you're a person who has been on a journey to, bring who you are as an artist into an authentic place. And you have taken this journey to many places. I mean, when you went to Korea and you filmed the Olympics there, that was a completely life-changing experience. Talk about that for a minute, please.
Oh, that was in Seoul, Korea. That was 1988, some time ago. But in fact, hopefully, Japan is hosting the Olympics this summer, and it's quite a event to be a part of, because it's like we had 180 countries that come together, and 180 flags have to be found. You don't think of 180 national anthems have to be organized, and then of course I was with NBC, so we were featuring the American athletes, but around the world, each country has their own special athletes they're proud of, and it gives you a real, different perspective. And a little country like Korea was so proud to host the Olympics. They went all out, and their military contributed, and, they really, because no one thought, they were very worried whether a little country could, have the resources to hold, but they did, and they had all these. They have to have like 30 different venues. When you think about it, gymnastics and tennis and soccer, and of course track and field is the highlight of it. That's the main feature, but basketball and baseball. There's all kinds of sports, rowing and canoeing and kayaking, and you don't think of, I never thought of that many sports, but boy, here I was, having to cover them all. And you take, and you get to know of course, in Seoul, I didn't understand a word of Korean. And I'd look at buildings that, you look like at least in, France, you could kind of make out the language. Not in Korea, not in Asian countries. I look up at a building, I'd have no idea what it was, with the symbols. But it was, it expanded my horizons, of course, because you're a guest, and people don't like Americans all over sometimes we embarrassed actually that Koreans lost the boxing match, and I was we stayed with the loser, it was like NBC covered it too long, and so the next morning Korea was really upset with us as Americans. Here I am going to work on the subway, and I'm the only American there, a white Caucasian guy, and everybody's looking at me like, who are you? Why, you're one of those guys. So, fast I had to learn what we were doing and how to read the papers and, know what, because they have a special perception, perspective. It's the host country. And of course they want to win their events, and it just broadens your horizon so much. Plus the food. I love the food, kimchi and bulgogi and all kinds of new experiences I'd never had, that kind of menu before. So it was exciting. It certainly is.
So what I like about what you described there is that even though there were some things that were about saving face for the Korean culture,
right,
they didn't want to be presented as losers, you still experienced an enormous amount, and it really did change you as a person, because in a different culture where you can't even read what's on the buildings or even understand the language, even in part because you can't read that language,
right,
you were really humbled, and you still did your work and were focused on being the artist and being receptive to the new experience. That's an interesting comment, because a lot of people under those circumstances, obviously they would fall apart in certain areas of their life. They would, they'd become germophobic, they'd become paranoid. I mean, a lot of things could emerge. But for you, the challenge was met, and you grew from that experience, and you saw things from their perspective. So,
and especially the opening ceremony, opening and closing, but ceremonies are such an artistic presentation with their music and dance and colors. That's all I remember, all the colors, the Korean colors, and they just were outstanding, because I'd done the 84 games 4 years earlier, and it was kind of a Western theme, and, our exploring how we developed as a country and the Wild West and Hollywood and all that. It was very much part of that opening ceremonies. And then 4 years later, so I've always, liked the Olympics, and we'll see what Japan has in store. Of course, their technology is outstanding, so they'll be doing some wonderful creative stuff.
John, I'm going to take and tell you thank you so much, and please...
Oh, you're welcome.
And
it was fun.
What a great conversation, and I really appreciate you being authentic, open, honest, and available for this dialogue. And, of course, you're dear to my heart, but, yeah, thank you for doing this with me. It was very
Well, you're welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you very much, John. Have a good day.
Enjoy the day.
Thank you very much. What a great conversation, because John's the most talented documentary videographer I know, and he's just really incredibly talented. And who John is doesn't really emerge until you put him behind a camera, and then he becomes the camera. and he takes and is able to film straight from his heart. So it's an amazing transformation to watch and to observe what he's able to capture. So, and I am really happy for him because it's the first time in his life that he's truly free of all constraints and has an opportunity to pursue his spiritual, humanitarian, and artistic goals without any restraint. So it is, it's a pleasure. It's just truly a pleasure to be able to sit back and observe, and let's see what emerges, because I know greatness is behind it, and I know more talent is behind that, and I know more artistry will emerge. So that has been, for me personally, has been a great, great thing to observe. And although he is sort of soft-spoken about it, there's an entire community of people in Southern California from Mission Viejo High School that were changed, motivated, and became part of that process of film and media simply as the result of having him as a teacher. So that's the conversation for today. And I do see John as a humanitarian, a person who wants to change the world, make the world a better place, and make a contribution as an artist in order to make it happen. So I've got another person who's going to join me. It's the same. It's another story about the journey and what happens on the journey. And so I'm just going to wait until she tells me hello, and I am all set. And this is a different journey. And I went on a trip to Africa twice, and I have to tell you, if you're thinking about doing it, if you follow the rules and you follow the guidelines, you're perfectly safe there. And I've got Kelly with me. Kelly, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. You did something extraordinarily exciting for your honeymoon, which is traditionally an English custom, but you did it with your husband. Please share with my audience your great honeymoon.
Yeah, so probably prior to us even being engaged, we had both discussed that doing safari in Africa was a bucket list, especially what's going on with the global climate crisis and everything that is impacted by that. We wanted to ensure that we got to see a lot of these beautiful animals in their natural habitat while they were still around. So we decided that in lieu of gifts for our wedding, that we would do a honey fund for our dream vacation to Africa. We were able to spend 3 weeks in Tanzania, where we visited 3 different safari national parks, and then we were able to go to the island of Zanzibar, where we spent about a week there. And it was more amazing than I could have even ever imagined or expected, and it's a trip that my husband and I joke that we'll be talking about until we die.
Okay. So, tell my listening audience a little bit about your life, because when you told me, when I found out from my daughter that you were taking this trip, I said, Kelly will never be the same. This trip will transform her in a way that is very, very deep, and she as a person will look at the world differently. So sort of talk about, in a lot of ways, you have a story in your life about education and where you lived, and so talk about that, just real brief.
Yeah, so I'm from Southern California, born and raised, and I went to school to become an attorney, and I was able to finally reach that goal, and it was not without trials and tribulations. And so it was definitely, that was one of the biggest accomplishments that I've had in my life up until this point. And after I had passed the bar, we had decided that it was time to get married and move forward with our life and family planning. But we wanted to make sure we got to do this amazing trip prior to starting a family. And so we knew that it would impact us just because of the nature of the journey. You know, it takes a very long time to get out there. It's a difficult journey. And we didn't really know what to expect. I only have had Suzanne and one other friend that I've known that has traveled to Africa that I personally know. And so we did not really know what to expect. And so we got there, and our minds were absolutely blown away by the sense of welcoming that we felt, the way that the people treated us. A lot of these people have so little, but their outlook on life is so much more positive than people in the United States. One of my favorite memories was watching, we were in Zanzibar, and these two young children, their mother owned a shop right next to the hotel we were staying at, and she owned like a little gift shop, and they were playing with sand as their toy, and they would throw it up in the air and run away and see if they could run away before the sand would fall on them. And I just remember thinking that they have so little, and I've never seen two kids smile and laugh so much before in my lifetime. And it really refocuses your life on what's important, what you can live without, and really what truly makes you happy along the way in life, because I think that there's a lot of focus in Western culture on things versus experiences and memories. And I just know that every day we would pinch ourselves and just say, is this really happening? Are we really seeing this? Did we really just see these things? And we cried a lot because it was so beautiful. And every day we just went to bed with this sense of, we are so fortunate to get to experience these people in this place. And you never come back the same, and your worldview is not the same. And the appreciation and gratitude I have for the people who hosted us while we were there is immeasurable. And we're still in contact with our safari guide. We spent a week with him, and so day in and day out we traveled with him by car everywhere, and we consider him a brother now. And you know, we will be fortunate enough if we can get back there, you know, in the future.
So I went into the countryside of Rwanda, Africa, into a zone called Gisenyi, which is the little border crossing into the Congo, less than 1 kilometer to the Congo, actually directly into the Congo. And what I was struck by, and it sounds so odd, I was struck by how oxygen-rich the air was, the smell of the air, the feeling of the air was just, it was really transforming. When I sit back and I think about that, when I would step outside and I would just take a deep breath, I was like, what is this? Because there's no cars, there's no pollution, it's just, there's no plastic bags. There's just the power of your feet to take you from one spot to the next, the rain that comes out of the sky and waters the vegetables, which are then carried into a person's kitchen and prepared for you. So it is such a simple and direct life. I was struck by people's generosity, hospitality, kindness, and how safe I felt the entire time, which, when you're talking about it, you know, it was an incredibly warm, loving environment where it was perfectly safe.
I 100% agree. I actually felt more safe leaving my passport in my wallet and our tents unlocked there than I would walking around in Southern California. People there, I think, have a lot more respect for one another, and they just, as long as they can bring a smile to your face, their day seems to be made. And it's silly because the saying from The Lion King, Hakuna Matata, I didn't really think that they said that there, and they actually do, and it's something they live by, and it's no problem. Nothing is a problem there. And I just felt that everyone that we met, you know, they had a really big impact on our lives, and we in turn had a big impact on several people's lives too, and they would pull us aside and just say, thank you so much for, you know, sharing your experiences with us and talking to us about your own lives and asking us questions about our lives. And it was just one of those, it was just a magical experience. And I I personally encourage anyone who has the means to get there to do it, because it is not like, I've traveled quite a bit, it is not like anywhere else in the world that I've been, and it is my absolute most favorite place that I've ever been in my life.
So Katharina told me a story, and you haven't actually ever told me this story, so tell us the story about the monkeys in the village. Please tell us that little story.
Yeah, so when we first arrived, we arrived in, we flew into Kilimanjaro and we drove to Arusha, which we stayed on a coffee plantation the night before our safari started. And the next morning our guide picked us up, and we had breakfast that morning, and there was a bunch of vervet monkeys that were all around the property, and there was a bunch of avocado trees. And so they were eating these avocado trees, and it was just, for me, it's the most insane thing ever, because I'm a huge animal lover, but I've only ever really seen these animals behind cages and at zoos. And so my husband and I were with our cameras, and we were out taking some photos of these monkeys, and they let you get very close to them. And so I'm just freaking out the whole time, because it's just, the start. It was the start of our safari, and it was still at the hotel. And we go to get in the truck with our safari guy, Cornell, and we start talking with him as we're driving through the countryside, and we're passing all of the Maasai huts, and we're having a conversation about kind of differences. And I was saying to him, this morning has already been so crazy because all of those monkeys they're just everywhere. And he said, what do you mean? And I was like, there was monkeys everywhere at breakfast this morning, and it was just the coolest thing to see. And he said, what do you mean, you don't have monkeys in Long Beach? And I said, well, we do, but you're not going to see them walking around in the open. And he was like, oh, that's weird. And my only response in my head was, no, this is weird. But it was the first time you realize what a stark contrast our two worlds are. He also had asked me, I'm sorry?
It just makes me want to laugh really hard. It just makes me want to laugh.
Yeah, we were driving past these Maasai huts, and you see all these young children on the side of the road, and they're herding their goats and their cattle, and this is that's their wealth. And so every day they take them to feed and they take them to water, and it's these young children, some of them 3-4 years old, with their Maasai sticks, and they're herding these cattle. And we were driving past, and it was just miles and miles of this. And he asked me, he said, do the houses in your community look like this? And he's talking about the straw huts. And I said no. And I didn't really know how to respond to that, because I wanted to be as respectful as I could. But it was another example of just how different our worlds are. And, these people that are living in these straw huts, that it's part of their culture, they're Maasai. And they live with so little, and they're so incredibly happy, and they know no different. And it was just one of those things where every single day you count your blessings that you were fortunate enough to be able to go on this type of trip, and not just go on this type of trip, but actually get to interact with locals and not just stay at these 5-star hotels, which is what a lot of people do when they're on safari, is they go and they don't interact with any people. They stay in their comfort zone, and we went completely out of our comfort zone. And it was probably the most fun experience of that trip, was getting to meet these local people and sitting down with actual Maasai warriors, and with broken English and our few Swahili words we know, trying to talk to them about differences. And it was just, the most incredible, life-changing experience that I've ever had. And I'll dream about it and think about it forever.
Wow. Yeah, that's what I would say. Going into Africa would completely transform your world view, because it's where all of mankind originated from, and the civilization and the cultures are dying out, and it's simply centered on greed, people wanting something from that country, and that country is sitting in a position with some of the most precious resources of human life, animal life, and they are a very, very rich people, and they're very, very happy. And it's just such a stark contrast to Western thinking. So What a really, so I got to ask you, because I have my own travel story, how, if you don't mind telling us, how long did it actually take you to depart from your home to the airport, and from the airport to the next part of your journey?
So we flew out of LA, and we got to the airport in enough time, so it was 2 hours at LA, and then it was a 16-hour direct flight to Dubai. We spent a night in Dubai, and then it was a 6-hour flight to Dar es Salaam, and then it was a 1-hour flight to Kilimanjaro, and then it was a 3-hour drive from Kilimanjaro to Arusha, where we stayed. And then we stayed in Arusha that night, and then it was a 2.5-hour drive from Arusha to Tarangire National Park, which was where we actually started our journey. So it was a lot. On the way home, it was about 27 hours of nonstop travel.
Right. Okay. So I started out in Dana Point, California. I went to LAX, and from LAX I went to Istanbul, and in Istanbul my connecting flight to Rwanda was missed. It was the my flight, and that was a 2-hour drive to LAX, and it was a 2-hour wait, and then it was a 18-hour flight into Istanbul, and then it was a 24-hour wait in order to catch the next plane, because the plane going into Rwanda only left once a day. And then into Rwanda, I got into Rwanda, and it was an 8-hour flight, and it was 2 a.m., so I couldn't catch the bus out to the countryside, and the bus ride out to the countryside was 4 hours. And then the ride in the taxi was, when I got to the small border crossing, was probably about 30 minutes. And then there was no other way to get to my destination except for to walk in the end and to drag my suitcases with me. So it is definitely for the person who is sincere in their heart, in their intention to get out and see that. The other part of your story that I really love, Kelly, is the part where your husband proposed to you. And if you would love to share that with our listeners today, I would love for you to tell that story.
Yeah, so that actually, that was, I think it was like 4 years ago right now, but we were actually up in Salinas, California. His brother was at a conference, and we decided to take a road trip up to Monterey to go to the aquarium. Most of our travel has to do with animals, and so we wanted to go up and see that beautiful aquarium. And so the one had crashed when that big mudslide had happened, so we couldn't get to our destination. And so he said, would you mind staying at a zoo for a night? And I said, do you know me? Of course not. Let's stay at a zoo. So he rented a room at this place called Vision Quest Bed and Breakfast, and it is a private zoo owned by a family that a lot of their animals that they have have come from either circuses or animals that are too old. A lot of them, they're kind of sad stories, but they kind of shelter all of these animals, and they've built this like beautiful property. And so one of the benefits of staying at this particular zoo was that they only have 10 tents on the property, and in the morning elephants bring you your breakfast. I didn't really know what that meant. And so the night before we had gone, and elephants have been one of my favorite animals my whole life, and I'd never actually gotten to touch one. And so the night before, he had scheduled they called it bedtime with Buck, which was their giant bull elephant they had there. And what we got to do is we got to go in and feed him his bedtime snack and walk him to the place where he slept. And so that night I got to touch an elephant for the first time, and I was just absolutely in love, and it was one of those oh my God moments of my life. And he has a picture of me the first time I got to touch his tusks, and the smile on my face is huge. And so I went to bed that night thinking this could not get any better, and lo and behold, about 3 a.m. am woken up by my, at the time, boyfriend, and he cannot sleep. And he woke me up, and I said, I can sleep. Why are you waking me up? And he said, I can't. And all we could hear in the background was the lions roaring. So it was just one of those insane moments. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to bed because we have a big day. We're actually getting to do a private tour of the zoo the next day. And so we went to bed, and the next morning we got up, and he was kind of hurrying me to get ready, and he was telling me to curl my hair and all. And I'm like, I'm meeting an elephant. I don't know why this matters. And then I was watching him put a camera on top of our tent, and he was acting very bizarre, and I knew something was up. And so he's kind of fussing around with everything that morning. And then, it's our turn for breakfast. And so you see it was Christy and Paula were the elephants' names. You see them walking up, and I have very bad vision. And so I could not really see what was going on, but I could see the elephants because obviously they're gigantic. And as the elephants start walking up, my vision gets a little bit more clear. And Christy, the elephant, is holding a chalkboard that says, on her tusks, that says, "Will you marry me?" And so obviously I break down into tears, and this whole thing is on film. So we got to watch it, and I ugly cried for about 5 minutes on camera. And then right after we got engaged, we called our families and our friends, and then we ended up going to get a private tour of the zoo, and we got to bathe one of the elephants. So that kind of solidified that we had to do safari for our honeymoon. And then this is just a side story, and I don't know if Catherine told you this, but our first day, because elephants are just such a huge part of my life, and people always give me things that are elephants. Every birthday, holiday, I get elephant stuff. And our first day in Tarangire, I told our guide, Cornell, that my trip would be made if I got to see an elephant. And he kind of joked because Tarangire is known for their elephants. They have the highest population of elephants in Tanzania. And so I see off in the distance an elephant, and so I yell to him to drive over there. And he drives over there, and we see 2 elephants coming over a hill. And as they start coming over the hill, we start noticing there's a lot more behind them. And so we're parked, because in all the national parks, you must stay on the roads. And so we're parked on the road, and the elephants start coming closer to us. And as they're coming closer, it's 2, and then it's 5. And then all of a sudden there's about 25 elephants, and it's this family of elephants walking towards us. And they walk over to this tree, and our guide pulls us up. At this point, we're the only safari car around there right now. Our guide pulls us up right next to, as close as comfortably you can get to these elephants. And we start noticing that they are picking up the dirt from the ground, and they're spraying themselves with it. And there's, young babies, and then there's bull elephants, and there's mothers, and it's this whole huge family. And our guide tells us, our guide's been doing safari for over 10 years, and he tells us that 2 months prior, one of the family members from that elephant family had passed away, and because it was so close to the road, the rangers had to burn the elephant because they don't interfere. Rangers don't interfere with any of the wildlife in the national parks. But this was going to cause, scavenger animals to come, and it was too close to the road for that to be comfortable for them. So they had burned this elephant. And so what these elephants were actually doing was that they were bathing themselves in the ashes of their dead family members. And Cornell told us that every time they pass this spot, they stop there, and they spend about an hour there. And even the young babies pull up the ash, and they essentially bathe themselves in the ash, and it's their it's like them, giving thanks to this elephant, and they do that, and then they walk away. And it was one of the most, he told us that he had only seen it ever happen once before, and it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life. And me and my husband are both bawling, crying at this point, because it was watching one of the smartest animals on the planet grieve its own family members in the same way that we would, where you would go to a gravesite, And so it was stuff like that continued to happen on our trip. And at the end of our trip, our guide ended up telling us that he believed that the animals brought themselves to people who had good intentions for the animals, and that some people can go on safari and not see half as many things as we did, but because of our love and our heart for the animals, that the animals were bringing themselves to us. So it was just one of those spiritual awakenings that, you kind of get what you give, you get what you put out in the universe. And so he believed that all the crazy things that we got to see on this trip were as a result of who we were as people and our love and caring and passion for these animals.
Cool. consciousness. Animal consciousness changes the dynamic of responsibility. We don't have the right to slaughter the animals because they have consciousness, and we can no longer use the excuse that we are man. And it is interesting because it has taken an evolutionary cycle of awareness for us to come to the place of understanding that we're not the only creatures on the planet with consciousness, and that's a direct demonstration. You know, you see it with the whales, you see it with the dolphins, you see it with the elephants. I mean, you see it in every animal civilization. It is our ignorance that has blinded us to that awareness. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And I'm hoping that I've got somebody to do an astrology conversation with us today. So you're welcome to stay and listen, Kelly. I think you might enjoy it.
All right. Well, thank you, Suzanne. Have a great day.
You're welcome to stay and listen. I think you'll know the person who's going to do you'll listen. So let's get Catherine on the line here.
Hi, Kelly. Hi, Mom.
Hey, Catherine, there you are. What are you? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hi. So it's so funny because, my mom and I don't discuss like who she's having on the podcast, and every time I come on, I'm like have my notes out to like talk about the astrological aspects that are happening, and then there's always a theme that emerges from the people she talks to, and that applies to what's going on with our astrology. So I love it because I didn't even know she was talking to you or to John today and about your travel experiences. And so there's two themes that kind of emerged. We're coming at the end of Mercury retrograde. For those of us, talked about Mercury retrograde last time. It is over on the 9th. Just white knuckle through it. We're almost at the end. But this Mercury retrograde has really been about rewiring the brain and rebirth and using our intuition and what happens to us on these great travel experiences that Kelly and John described. But, the rewiring of their brain, these new experiences, this spiritual rebirth, and you always use intuition during your travel. So I love how those stories really illustrated those themes for us today as we're kind of traveling through a lot of this energy, this intense energy during Mercury retrograde. For me, it's been really intense emotionally. I've witnessed a lot of death and rebirth, and I'm sure a lot of people, if you're really sensitive, are feeling it. So it's almost over. Now, what happens at the end, which dials up, I think, the intensity a little bit, is this Virgo new moon that starts on March 9th. And Virgo's ruling planet is Mercury. So with these two energies back to back, we're really going to be able to see the bigger picture. And as you know, Mom and I, you always talk about how Virgos are best when they're doing humanitarian work. And so I love that these stories also brought the humanitarian aspect, into travel, going to these other countries where they were able to, just see this radical way of life and how it's so different to how we live here. So this new moon, or this full moon, is going to be all about acceptance. And for Virgo, that's really hard. If you're a Virgo, you know that you're really critical, you're really a perfectionist. And the thing is they're really great detail-oriented hard workers, Virgos, but they get caught up in the details. And so they're just hard on themselves. So, this full moon is going to be shining light on things that feel foggy or unclear, and really just giving us a path where we're able to come into our own strength and inner wisdom, that we have the power to heal ourselves. Moons are always healing energy, I think. A new moon or a full moon, it's always a lot of energy. So it's great because it's a new start to the astrological year that all this happens, right? We've got, the spring equinox later this month. So, it's just like a nice, we get to this Mercury retrograde, which I like to call our spring cleaning. We come into this full moon, which is all about acceptance. And so just using a lot of that energy to kind of clear and go into the spring equinox, and just start a new astrological year. So,
wow. Okay.
it's a lot happening this month. But, and the other piece was that Neptune is active during this full moon. And so we're trying to work from the heart and keep our ego in check. And so I love that, keeping your ego in check as you travel to these new countries, really these humbling travel experiences kind of just gives almost like a fable story to what we kind of need to keep in check. We learn from fables. So I like that these stories were really able to put this astrological information into perspective for all of us, hopefully.
Oh, that's a great analogy. The Deep Psychic Reading at gmail.com if you want to write to me. Phone number 714-400-7384. And this is Suzanne Wyman, the Deep Psychic. Ladies, thank you for joining me today. Have a great afternoon. Thanks for the astrological update. And Kelly, thank you for being authentic, honest, and vulnerable in your story. It was fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Become a Goldilocks Productions VIP patron. Receive exclusive access to live stream special and other epic perks. Join the Goldilocks Productions VIP community today.